Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the October 6th radio show. This is Peter. This is lecture 2 of 8. It's going to be called A Resource-Based Economy, the Economic Model. And I want to basically, in a logical sense, summarize what a resource-based economy is, its train of thought, and some of the core attributes of its construction. Now, before I begin, though, there's some temporal things. We have a need for more linguistic team members. We need more translators to do some work. So, on the forum, there should be a post that you can see a link that goes to a wiki, and the wiki will show a series of languages where we do not have proper translators or enough translators. And if you have the ability to participate, please join, because we really can't do much unless we have a communicative ability to reach every language on this planet, as you might imagine. It's one of those complex, evolutionarily aggravating things, but languages are very interesting. I do wish eventually we can find a balance between languages, and it would certainly bring the world closer together to be able to share more or less a single language on some level. I know some will debate that for cultural or communicative reasons, but who knows, in time, hopefully we can move towards something like that. We certainly need an improvement in language in general, as Jacques discusses at length. Second point, the movie trailer was put out. It's gotten a tremendously good response in the 2 days it was up. I was very happy to see that type of resurgence of interest. It's been 2 years since the last film was produced, and I'm very happy that hopefully there'll be motivation for this film. And obviously, the intent is to push these ideas along, get the public to wake up to what is a growing cancer, which has to be stopped as far as I'm concerned. None of this stuff is going to come to any resolution in the current system, and I hope everyone kind of understands this. And later in the lecture series, I'll describe that more specifically in the collapse portion. Okay, a resource-based economy, an economic model. What is an economic model? In the most simplistic terms, you could say an economic model shows variables and the dynamic processing or interaction of said variables to meet production and distribution demands and anything else generally related to economic functionality. That's obviously a very loose categorization and definition I've just given, especially if you go back and research the various economic models that have been produced, by economists, monetary economists over the past 200 years. You will enter into just a mind-blowing world of risk assessment and stochastic behavioral models and interest rate to exchange rate protocols, arbitrage conditions, service vector evaluations, rational choice theories, price equilibrium, attributes, and so on and so forth. It's fascinating, truly fascinating. However, as a point of consistency, since I'm on the subject, nowhere in these highly intellectualized, sophisticated, novel, creative, and often internally sound, structurally logical expressions will you find anything about planetary resources. Will you find anything about the science of creating proper goods? Nowhere will you find anything about longevity, efficiency of production in the sense of conservation, or created anything that would reflect true economic efficiency, which is, of course, the intelligent management of all of our resources and the methods of mining, culminating, producing, and distributing those resources. Zero. Virtually all economic monetary models simply revolve around various notions of labor and value, which is an absolutely convoluted concept, savings, interest rates, and again a long string of previously aforementioned variables which are utterly decoupled from every kind of natural resource and processes on this planet or anything tangible. And the processes, the economic matrices, are nonsensical and absolutely unrelated. They are abstractions of thought using classic linear equations to depict variables in closed, finite systems that have numerous presumptions about what they represent when there is absolutely no linear direction, no linear referent to anything truly tangible at all. If you go through the work of the high priests of modern market theory, Ludwig von Mises, F.A. Hayek, Milton Friedman, John Maynard Keynes, Adam Smith, you find some wonderfully articulate and perfectly sound reasoning, but that reasoning exists within a closed set of variables, and a series of presumptions are always evident. And again, those presumptions have nothing to do with anything that's provably tangible, no physical reference. These huge projections and speculations on human behavior. Economists, when you break them down, all the individuals I've just mentioned, they're not scientists. They're not basing anything on actual scientific evaluation. They are simply philosophers. And that's all every monetary economic theorist has ever been, is a philosopher of the means of production and distribution, not scientists in the sense that they actually have a physical referent to balance and test their models. In fact, if you look at the criticisms that Hayek and Mises and Keynes and all of the others, when they're criticized, they tend to fall back on the same basic set of defenses, which are more or less comparison-oriented. For example, they'll say, and I've heard this countless times, when anything's brought up about problems with the market system, such as rampant poverty and abuse and slave labor, they say, well, you know what? Say what you want about poverty and conflict, but history has proven that capitalism and the monetary structure has created more wealth and efficiency and high-quality goods and quality of life than any system we've ever known, so there. No. The only thing that's created prosperity in the human population, the only thing that's responsible for human development in the growing population, which has been going exponentially, the only thing that's created a higher standard of living on this planet are, in fact, two things. The advent of technology and the discovery of cheap hydrocarbon energy. That's it. That is what has driven this seemingly advanced society, which is actually quite in reverse when you look at it. The quality of life of most human beings is actually in reverse right now because of this exact same system. For the exact same reasons that gave the illusion of prosperity to begin with. This system has in fact run its course. What you're seeing has been a cosmic delusion. It has been a complete coincidence that technological innovation, coupled with the emergence of an abundance of energy that's cheap all over the planet, has coupled with the advent of this economic system called the market system. Now, I know right now all the monetary indoctrinated individuals that support this system are chomping at the bit right now on the edge of their seats going, but wait a minute, the reason we've had progress in technology is because competition has motivated that progress. Well, is that really true? Is there any evidence for that, really? Have any of the major contributions of technology come from people that have been outspoken about their interest to make money off of it? I don't think so. If you research Daniel Pink and his work on motivation, which is basically a compilation of numerous psychological studies about what it means to be creative, about versus what it means to be mechanical, you tend to find that creativity, hence technological innovation, is actually driven not by competition whatsoever. On the other side of the spectrum, it's very, very clear at this point that technological innovation is now currently being hindered by the market system and the values and the processes therein, with the need for scarcity, with the need to maintain establishments. We have such profound technology today sitting on the sidelines that it will not come to fruition because it will override existing establishments, and it is simply not profitable to create the type of sustainability that these new technological advents create. So, 3 points. A, the greatest contributors to scientific innovation have not done it for money, and you can research that thoroughly. B, psychological motivation is not driven by competition for creative invention. And C, right now we live in a state of social evolution within market theory that is actually hindering technological process because of the very dynamics of the system itself. Monetary economics exists in the same form it has always existed, as nothing but a religion. It's based on closed presuppositions which are essentially immutable in the eyes of those who practice it. going back to Adam Smith and the, quote, invisible hand. What the hell is that? The invisible hand, that's it? I mean, you got to be kidding. Is there any way to test this invisible hand? No, not at all. And it's a presupposition of some type of monetary God, and it's absolutely insane. It operates with circular reasoning in a closed kind of mind lock, just like any other religion. And it's absolute blasphemy, of course, when you choose to articulate anything out of the presuppositions of that belief system. Now, please note that I don't mean to be insulting towards those minds I mentioned, Ludwig von Mises, Hayek, Friedman. They're very brilliant individuals within the confines of the variables they choose to acknowledge. Just like there can be very brilliant individuals within any religion within the confines of the philosophy that they choose to accept while they blinker out everything else. But the bias is so transparent. I have a book by Ludwig von Mises called The Anti-Capitalistic Mentality. Now, just the name of that just reeks of outrageous presupposition and arrogance, does it not? The very statement, the anti-capitalistic mentality, presupposes that anyone who is against the capitalist system or the market system must be of a particular form of preconditioned mentality. And therefore, any objective and tangible open conversation is immediately void because it's just a mentality. If that isn't religious stigma, I don't know what is. Now, I want to be clear here because if you read the Mises work and the defense of the capitalist system by many works, by many different economists, they actually support it very, very well within the confines of the arguments that they choose to recognize. I want to clearly point out that the Zeitgeist movement and the resource-based economy, what our angles are, what our problems are in fact very, very different from any other objections to the economic theories put forward. While there are certainly overlaps, ours is explicitly different, and I have yet to hear any economic rebuke of anything we say that isn't simply a projection of earlier arguments which they feel have already been previously debunked. It is nothing more than a religion, and I want to make sure everyone thoroughly understands that. And when you approach people that believe in these ideas, you have to understand that very often your logic will be cut off because they will blinker out information in their own schemata, whether they're even conscious of it or not. That's the power of belief. And unfortunately, some people really will never understand rational associations because of their prior conditioning in life, but that's for another conversation. Okay, that's enough of that. I apologize for that tangent. Let me get back on track here and talk about a resource-based economy, because once you understand the ground-up approach of a resource-based economy, it immediately makes void all notions of prior economic monetary theory, because it simply doesn't make any sense otherwise. The difference between monetary economic theory and a resource-based economy is that we are actually taking account of what sustains life. We're actually taking account of raw materials. True economic theory can only manifest from the properties of all raw materials that exist on this planet, coupled with the processes that organize and navigate the mining, production, distribution, updating, waste recycling, and all other attributes required to maintain stasis, abundance, and hence sustainability. Now, for the sake of this discussion, I'm not going to talk about human values or human wants. I'm going to simply leave it under the arbitrary distinction of, quote, demand. And that's it, demand as an abstraction. I want to point out very clearly that it doesn't matter if we're talking about the human species or the species of cattle or vegetation. Every attribute of this model holds true in and of itself in the foundation of its logic. Obviously, though, within the human species, we have an advanced society with transportation, extensive energy requirements, so that will be taken into account under the guise of demand in a very general sense. But I want to reiterate the point that in order to understand this model, you have to remove yourself from the equation in the most direct sense. It doesn't matter what you want. If the earth can't provide it, then your needs are invalid. It's bad enough that everyone in this culture is conditioned into a value system that pushes forward a GDP-driven economic structure that requires perpetual consumption to fuel employment and to hence fuel survival of people, not only on the sustenance level. I don't mean consumption so people can go eat and they eat and consume. I mean that it requires material consumption rampantly to keep this idiotic machine going so everyone can go to their stupid jobs and they can come home with their dollar bills and then support themselves with the necessities of life. That is the driving factor that will lead to the absolute demise of this system, and that's only one segment of that detrimental cancer attribute. By the way, what I mean by stupid jobs, since I threw that in there in case that's misinterpreted, I mean that any occupation that doesn't have a direct relationship to contribution for society, I mean it doesn't actually create something tangible that it will improve people's lives. This, of course, would include advertising, Wall Street, the entire monetary enterprise, not to mention the service system, service industry, where I believe roughly 70% of all kiosk jobs, waiting jobs could easily be replaced by automation right now, not to mention it wastes people's lives to be stuck in those positions when they could be educated to actually create and to contribute to society. The majority of monetary-based labor requirements are not based on production of anything tangible for social concern. They're based merely on keeping people doing something so they can get purchasing power to keep the entire thing going. Waste of life, waste of resources, lack of contribution. Okay, the foundation of a resource-based economy is the recognition of what we could call the life ground. The life ground is a gestural distinction to refer to the attributes of human survival that are without opinion and are immutable, empirical, and cannot be challenged by cultural relativism or any competing ideology or theology. The life ground is really simple and has multiple levels, but for the first level, if we were to give it such a distinction, you have, clean air, oxygen-rich air is required for us to survive. We have the need for clean water. The human body is about 60% water, last I checked. Human nutrition. Every human being obviously needs an ideal amount of calories, proteins, minerals, vitamins, all of which can be quantitatively assessed on average to meet balance and optimum health. The next level of this life ground has to do with social functionality, not just the individual requirements we need to survive, but what society needs to maintain itself in an optimum way. Human beings cannot survive alone. We are intrinsically social organisms. I know we often talk about how there's no human nature, but we relate this to behavior. There's a very, very real human nature on a physiological level. And one thing that's become clear in recent studies is that humans are intrinsically social. If you were born into an environment and you were fed, but you never had any form of human contact, you would die. This is an amazing realization. It goes to show that we are not islands. We are social, which means we exist, in fact, as a social organism. We cannot survive in a vacuum in the development of the human being. So society itself reflects a collective social organism in the most complete scientific sense. The manifestation of that social organism occurs in our infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, and of course what we know as industry today. The mining of materials, the process of putting them together into component attributes, the process of production of needed goods, to the efficient distribution of those goods, to the assessment of periodic demand and the change of demand, to the replacement of goods and keeping things updated, to the recycling of broken down goods after their life cycle, and the reusing of those materials in the most efficient and wasteless manner we can come up with. So the social life organism, if you will, requires that we intelligently manage every single resource on this planet in order to maintain society. We could live in a hut somewhere under a tree and just pick berries, but that's not really a social life unless you just had a small hunter-gatherer tribe. Obviously, that's not what we're doing. And obviously, in that case, you still need to manage your resources in the exact same philosophical model. So, the intelligent management of the Earth's resources is priority number one to maintaining a society that wants to sustain itself. And if there's any goal that I hope we have, it's to sustain ourselves. I hope people do want to leave a good Earth for their children and their children's children, and to see the longevity of the species. And essentially, what the cold empirical goal of any organism is the survival of the species and reproduction. So, before I go on, I want to summarize these two brief points. The single human organism requires food, air, and water and nutrition. The social organism requires the intelligent management of all resources. Put together, very simply, we have to manage all of our resources in the most efficient way we possibly can. That is the basis of survival, and that is the basis of a resource-based economy at the very core. And as I will proceed to describe, everything is based explicitly on the preservation and intelligent management of those resources. Those two life ground issues taken into account, which is really one life ground if you think about it clearly, let's now think about the resource-based economy design. Yes, a resource-based economy is designed, centrally planned, just like an automobile is designed to work in a system. You don't take a bunch of parts and shove it into a, quote, automobile and give them free will and let them decide if they want to operate or not based on how much gain they're going to get from some other component of the car. A true system has to emerge on this planet to govern human society. There's no other choice. There's no opinion or cultural relativism to that whatsoever. We have a makeshift system. I'm going to stop there. I have a tendency to revert back into talking about the problems of the system when I'm here to really talk about what a resource-based economy design actually is. So, step one, a full survey of all planetary resources related to the life ground 1 and 2 that we just discussed. We cannot create a system of operation without understanding what we have to work with and the limitations of those attributes. These would be considered the economic variables in our economic model, or more specifically the core economic variables, because there are other variables that are processes oriented. And the matrices that are created are about the organization of these variables and how they relate to production and distribution in the most exact numerical way, meaning foreshadowing possible scarcity, depletion, efficient use of materials in a strategic way which averages out the best possible application of specific raw materials for specific production processes. In other words, and this brings me to my second point, it is the application of systems theory to the management of earthly resources. We're creating a system. It should be pretty obvious the necessity of this. How anyone could argue this, I have no idea. But very simply, again, it's a systems accounting and a systems approach to eventually production and distribution, which I'll cover next. So, we have our earthly survey. We have a system to govern it, which is easily doable through technology today and sensor systems. By the way, modern corporations already have a great deal of this information. They simply hoard it because they don't want people to understand. They're corporate secrets. They're proprietary. I can assure you that mining companies, for example, know the basic amount of diamonds or other materials they have at their disposal to a certain degree. So please don't pawn this off that it can't be done. Tracking earthly resources is being done. It's just not unified in any particular way, and it's certainly not complete because there isn't an intention to do so. There's no reason for people to do so outside of their own self-interest for the corporation. So, okay, the next point, production. This is also explicitly self-evident and does not fall victim to cultural relativism or human opinion as well. Production operates in a preservation model just like anything else because the very process of production is energy intensive and resource intensive. So naturally, again, preservation is key. Except preservation and efficiency work on a few different levels when it comes to production. On the lowest level, there's the science behind what it means to produce and culminate any given good. There's also taking into account the negative retroactions of the process itself. If you have a process that does something very well, but it produces a great deal of pollution, well, that's something that has to be dealt with in a quantitative model to figure out how it balances out as far as the variables. Naturally, we want to limit pollution at all costs. Naturally, anything that's produced, we also want to have the greatest longevity. That is also utterly rational within the system. Naturally, we need to have an intellectual design attribute to anything that's made that can foreshadow irrelevancy or obsolescence that might occur within the culmination of the component technology, where rather than having to throw the entire item away when it's obsolete, you actually update the item. This is very critical to sustainable design of future goods. Likewise, and this is another active, dynamic variable of this economic model, just as the ones I just expressed, is that you have to take into account depletion rates of materials you're using, and in the event that it's discovered that a particular component mineral is in depletion, you would find substitutes. You would work to hybrid substitutes or to find other existing substitutes, and you would offset that possible decline before any type of problem emerges. I think everyone can see where I'm going here. There is a set of objective variables given our goal to be sustainable and as clean and as efficient as possible that makes all of the actions utterly self-evident. Another level of this, to throw in another attribute that's of a higher level beyond design and use of the resources themselves, is the location of the physical factories, the physical centers that create these goods. It would be utterly irrational to have the core component attributes on one continent and the production facilities on another continent, and then distribution demand on the other continent. You'd have to find the most linear balance between those three attributes to limit the amount of energy required to move any of that stuff around. This is just basic, fundamental preservation theory, if you will, even though it's not a theory at all. It's absolutely self-evident. So I'm not going to go into a huge list of component attributes that would be taken into account, from negative retroactions to design protocols to efficiency to recycling. That's another very important one. We want things to have built into it the ability to break down or the ability to be reused. So those attributes are built directly into the item and foreshadowed as such. So when the component is turned back in for recycling, whatever can be utilized again is done so as efficiently as possible, to reduce the landfills that we see today, which do not have to exist whatsoever, etc. Okay, that leads me to the next level, distribution itself. Production and distribution both relate, of course, to public demand. Demand is easy to assess through public consensus, and once demand is set in motion for any particular good, it is easily trackable within the system, just as it's tracked today in any major department store. Whenever inventory runs low, they're tracking it and they put in new orders for more inventory. So the exact same process is essentially at work here, with no need for the tracking of money sequences or the use of money or the monetary system to track demand. Now, it's important to point out that the concept of value in a resource-based economy of any particular good can only relate to the possible scarcity of the resources that comprise that good, coupled with the complexity of the production of that good. So their physical reference, not what you see in the monetary system today, where value is essentially invented based on a number of nonsensical attributes, often vanity-oriented or falsely assumed scarcity of specific designs or what have you. Now, I want to also point out that in Jacques Fresco's work, once the efficiency mechanism is put into place, which governs in a resource-based economy, and the efficiency mechanism is throughout the entire thing, and I'll elaborate on this in the distribution model a little bit more in a second, the abundance created by the efficient use of resources, which would reduce the production consumption alone by a substantial percentage, will be enough to create what we could call an abundance on this planet for all the world's people. When we say an abundance, sometimes people interpret that the wrong way. Obviously, the planet is finite. Obviously, there's only so much copper. Nanotechnology offers some amazing prospects, but this is about resource management under the assumption that we do have finite resources that are immalleable to a certain degree. And again, back to Fresco's awareness, if we simply intelligently manage everything, all the world's people can benefit and live in an abundance, in a respective abundance. We're not talking about every individual having a gold-plated toilet and a 70,000-room mansion and 700 acres. You can extrapolate that irrational statement to just as equally as some movie stars that have 2 jet planes parked in their front lawn, or someone who has 50 automobiles, and we say to ourselves, "Oh, that's freedom." No, that's irresponsibility, is what that is. So, demand is assessed, goods are produced, the efficiency mechanism works throughout. And keep that term in mind, too, the efficiency mechanism as an economic variable. That's a decent statement to refer to the general and overall approach to how every attribute of the economic system functions. When it comes to distribution, there are more or less 3 ways I think I could describe this from what I come to understand. You have delivery of the goods to yourself. This can be done very, very efficiently without the use of humans driving trucks and delivery services, the U.S. Postal Service or UPS, through vacuum systems that will send goods directly to your home. People say, well, that's too much. No, we have a sewage system in our home. We have infrastructure for that. There is absolutely no reason why delivery systems of goods cannot happen in the exact same manner. You simply design it right in. In fact, there was a great individual who referred to the sewer system as the intestines of the city or the social system, which I thought was a great metaphor to keep that kind of collective feel going with this sort of social organism. So when you design the cities, you design mechanisms of transport right in, either above ground or below ground, to eliminate the need for human delivery services. That's a very basic logical thing. Everyone gets deliveries, everyone sends out waste. Another attribute of the city system, and this is a little bit beyond the resource-based economy economic model in specifics, but waste would also operate in the exact same fashion. You wouldn't have trucks pulling in and lifting up dumpsters. Waste would be built right into the system. Waste reduction, In early New York buildings, they had incinerators, and people would take their trash. It was actually a very unhealthy practice, and you would dump it down the chute. It would go into an incinerator. In the future, you'll have standardized packaging. In other words, every box will be made of a particular decomposable material that can probably be decomposed in your home. So you'll not only have a dishwasher in your home, you'll have a decomposition machine that can decompose every form of packaging material that's used for transport right there. Boom, you've reduced an outrageous amount of packaging and plastic waste by having this type of organic compound created that could be decomposed in your home, which does exist. It's just not mass-produced because of various financial reasons. So building things into the system, a systems design, that's basically what I was extending there. Delivery, waste reduction. And when you have waste that can't be decomposed, it goes into another mechanism that sends it somewhere else. No one comes to your house to pick it up. Anyway, the city system design is a little bit different than a resource-based economy economic model, so I'm not going to jump on that tangent. That's for another conversation. And Jacques always does a great job of talking about that as well. Distribution. So that's one element of distribution, home distribution. Or you could have distribution centers. Distribution centers can work a few different ways. Honestly, the most efficient way, using our efficiency mechanism, is to have what you consider as a rental type of arrangement. So obviously if you have a television set, you go and acquire the television set, the demand is tracked, and you keep the television set or the screen or whatever the advanced technology might be. I strongly doubt physical television sets will continue to exist in the future. I think you'll end up with very, very malleable forms of screens or projection systems, but that's again for another conversation. But whatever that good might be, if it needs longevity, it's something that you choose to have for extended periods, then you have it for extended periods. If it breaks, you return it for recycling, which I'll go through in a moment. However, say you want to get something temporarily. Say you want to go out and shoot some video with a nice camera. Well, then you get the camera, you take it, you do what you need to with it, and then you return it. There's no sense storing something in your closet that you're never going to use again. Again, this is the efficiency mechanism. It's about creating a world where everything is utilized. Same with automobiles. Not everyone should have a car. It's insane in this American culture. It's the staple of capitalism. I remember seeing old propaganda videos of capitalism versus communism, and they say, well, in America, everyone has an automobile. They don't have that in communism. And it was as though it was some value to get this thing that sits in your driveway for the majority of its life decaying. Not to mention the absolute pollution, both noise pollution, traffic pollution. If you've ever driven in New York and Los Angeles, well, if you don't want to blow your brains out just by being stuck in traffic, then you have the patience of a saint. Anyway, I won't go on that tangent. So this efficiency mechanism, again, can apply to every attribute of distribution. One thing I haven't mentioned is regional access. So say you want to go to a lake and you want to use a boat to go fishing or something to that effect. Well, people do this today. In fact, they go and they rent a boat. Well, you do the same thing, except you don't have to pay money for it. You gain the boat, you utilize it, and you bring it back. This applies to other attributes, such as getting a tennis racket at a tennis club, or anything you can think of, a violin. I would like everybody to go to their garages and their closets and look at things that they own that they rarely use and ask themselves, wouldn't it be great if I could just have access to the best version of this particular good when I needed it, as opposed to having to store it? And again, what this does is reduce tremendously the multiplicity of goods that are created over and over and over again. The waste reduction itself of that practice will again bring a material abundance, an accessible material abundance to so many more people on this planet. Now, very quickly before I go on, I do want to bring up certain practices that are associated with this model, even though they're not intrinsically built in, but they do have a relevance. For example, food accessibility. Right now, everyone has a kitchen in their home and they tend to eat in. In fact, it's a staple of saving money to eat in. But you tend to find that the culture prefers, at least in many areas, to eat out. To eat out is, in fact, from a structural standpoint, much more efficient than to cook food yourself. To make food in mass is always more efficient than to make food as an individual. So the restaurant-going phenomenon will carry over, except it will actually be an efficient practice, and it will not cost money. It will actually save energy and save food resources and eliminate waste for people to actually go to community-oriented eating areas or so-called restaurants. So distribution, in summary, I've jumped around a little bit here, is through a checkout system, a delivery system, or simply an acquisition system. And it's made available, it's tracked, the abundance is allocated, and again, the basis is on the intelligent usage of these goods, just like the intelligent management of the materials that the goods consist of, whether it's in the form of eating at a restaurant that is making food in mass, or it's in the form of not saving things that you don't actually use every day, and you return them to facilities where other people can have access to it. And by the way, a lot of people, when they hear stuff like that, they imagine going to a distribution center and getting some beaten up, broken thing, and they have to make do with it. No. Things are designed to last. Things are designed to work. Anything that doesn't work is updated and fixed on a constant basis. It's a very different paradigm. We really have to remember that every attempt at any form of centralized system has always worked within the monetary system one way or another, and always had to cut corners to produce anything. And of course, there's very few real centralized systems that have ever occurred in history. So you're getting the best. The best is all that's created. The highest efficient, best, most strategically created products are all that's ever created. So keep that in mind when evaluating these ideas. And again, and I can't reiterate this enough, it is through these preservation and strategic processes that will create an abundance for all the world's people. There's a lot of misinformation out there about the Zeitgeist movement, the Venus Project, and a resource-based economy regarding the promotion of abundance, because they don't understand what the mechanisms are that will alleviate the pressures we have in the current system to allow for an actual abundance. What we see today is only a fragment of what could occur if strategic management is put in place, as far as accessibility, as far as, of course, energy and the advanced models for creating renewable systems approach energy, which can reduce intermittency, which can harness supercapacitors. There's a whole string of technological advents that can be talked about, but that's not the subject of this conversation. But suffice to say, it is through preservation and strategic use that an abundance, an accessible abundance, will be created for the world's people, so everyone can live a healthy life and a high quality of living, reducing all types of conflict and mental neuroses, psychological neuroses, and all the structural violence of poverty and everything else, and I won't even go on that tangent. Moving forward, the next level, as I've already alluded to, is recycling protocols and updates. When you buy a computer console, you don't just throw the whole thing away when it becomes obsolete. Companies do not manufacture them, so they're complicated enough where you need to take it in somewhere to get replacement parts. You have an interchangeable system, just like with an automobile, as Jacques would always reference. You would simply pull out the engine. You could put a replacement engine in, lock and load. Things like this in the event servicing was required. You make it as efficient and easy as possible. You want interchangeable parts. You want universal components. Recently they came out with a universal phone charger, if I remember correctly. Why don't we do this with everything? Of course, the capitalists will argue that it reduces competition and innovation. That's complete nonsense, as I've already denoted. If people want to be motivated to have the best, they will work to create it not only for themselves, but for everyone else in society. So, updating goods and recycling. Everything is designed to break down correctly, and with the least amount of extended breakdown and the least amount of polluting attributes. We move to decomposable materials, not materials that are simply inexpensive to produce, that sit in landfills for thousands of years because they can't decompose. I think you get the train of thought here. Again, it becomes quite self-evident on a per-case basis. Now, with those general attributes described, and I hope that's been relatively clear, we can talk about labor and the placement of labor within this economic system. In a certain sense, labor isn't related to, quote, the economic model at all, because the economic model is completely physical. Labor is sort of an assumption that's made, which basically will be done intrinsically by automation because of the technical processes and the elimination of all of the excess jobs that don't fulfill any type of social role. Does that mean that there isn't a need for people to do something? Obviously, people will be doing lots of things. Most of them will be working to engineer, to create better efficiency, to create better goods, to take new technologies and apply them for the betterment of everyone. And this will happen. It's really sad to see the conditioning in this culture where everyone they literally lose motivation when they don't have monetary gain because of what's been created. They become aberrated. They get home from work and they don't want to do anything because they don't gain anything from their work. They have a high stress level, the stress level of losing their job, of the general temperament of the people they work with who are also in fear of losing their job and things of such. You can see why the psychology is what it is and why many people who hear this system, they say, oh, well, if I don't get paid for something, I'm certainly not going to work. Well, in many cases, that's true for them because they've been aberrated into that psychology. It doesn't have to be that way, and that's an unfortunate thing. We have to undo what the monetary system has done on that level, and it's a difficult thing. It's a very difficult value system attribute to overcome. But contribution to this system, once this type of efficiency mechanism is put in place, and I'm going to keep saying that word over and over again as an economic systems variable component because I do think it's a very important consideration, the amount of human labor required to maintain the system is actually very limited on a mechanical level. You'll have oversight of the factories that are producing goods through robotics and mechanization, which we have vast capabilities of. Cybernation of the industrial complex is going to happen one way or another, and I'm not going to talk about technological unemployment beyond the fact that it's very, very clear during this economic downturn that every major sector is moving to technological mechanization because they see the efficiency of it. They see the need to downsize. Everyone is struggling in this system. Well, except basic Wall Street, but then again, what do you expect? I mean, all the money that was thrown in for the bailouts all went to the wealthy elements of society, the investment community, and that's all that money was basically for. So I love the fact that you have unemployment continuing its slide, efficiency continuing its slide, and all the other barometers of true economic health, if you will, continuing its slide in this country, yet the stock market continues to go up. If anyone hasn't figured this out yet, it's utterly laughable, the illusion. So anyway, that's an aside. So this model is based on deliberate mechanization of labor. And not only is that intrinsically important from the standpoint of reducing human stress and the basic human well-being, it is also provably more efficient than human labor. And that's the thing that I pointed out in numerous lectures. The more mechanization has increased, the more efficiency has increased. The more unemployment has increased, the more efficiency has increased, meaning technological unemployment. I'll put it this way, the more employment drops in a given sector, the higher the efficiency is due to the application of technology. I'm referring to technological unemployment most of all. So that, again, becomes self-evident. So it is literally illogical and impractical for us not to apply mechanization to reach an optimum state of production. So that's a given as well. It's not an opinion. That is what the trends have foreshadowed. And we should lock onto this and love it for the emergence of what it actually means to the change of human society and what it means for an elevation of human beings. It's just profound to think what could happen if we actually move forward with this direction from just the quality of life. Actually, wait a minute, I almost forgot, in fact. Technological unemployment is not going to stop, as I mentioned. Mechanization is going to continue for the sake of profitability of corporations. However, what isn't discussed as these corporations do this is that they're displacing people, they're reducing purchasing power in every community, which means there's less money for people to go out and buy the goods that they're making through the mechanization. So it is a self-destructing phenomenon. It is one of those things that occurs in entropy, if you will, that is unstoppable, and it simply proves the false nature and the fact that this system has run its course. And it's that simple. It is outdated by the advent and development of modern science, technology, and just the phenomenon of human evolution and development itself. And that's that. So I've gone through the basic attributes of this economic model in a very logical way. I haven't been too quantitative about it, but when I do create the knowledge-based entry, I'll try to be much more extensive. I was actually hoping to be more extensive in this presentation, but I'm unfortunately strapped for time. And frankly, I think really if you understand what I just expressed, which is really just the tip of the iceberg as far as the overall specifics, as you might imagine. I didn't even go into the central computer database. I didn't even go into the mechanisms, specific mechanisms of assessment when it comes to evaluating, say, energy and what to use. But then again, the efficiency mechanism, if applied, shows the self-evident nature based on the general goal of maintaining a sustainable world. It doesn't take voting, it doesn't take human opinion, it doesn't take even a government of any accord to understand this. Human behavior is, of course, a problem, as easy to see that we've become very distraught as a species and very suspicious of each other, but that's an entirely different cultural problem, and that has nothing to do with the behavior of the economic system from the standpoint of sustainability. So while this might seem like an abstraction to many people, and everyone says, well, what about the use of terrorism, or what about fear of security, or what about, all these things that could come into play, those are temporal cultural attributes, okay? That's it. Those are not real. What I just discussed is actually real in the sense that it has the most longevity. The cultural problems we have are secondary, and we have a long ride to overcome the cultural issues. I absolutely agree with that. But that doesn't change the way society should be governed in the most sustainable and efficient manner. And I hope the train of thought here was followed. And I will be back next Wednesday to talk about what I think I called the profile of collapse, and understanding the attributes of the coming and, the growing economic crisis, which I think will probably collapse in a series of tiers. But we can talk about that next week. All right, everybody. Take care.